Sometimes timing is everything in life in general, and in particular in sports. When Peyton Manning had his neck problems and he missed all of 2011, the Colts picked a hell of a time to have a terrible year. But at least they did terrible right. They went all the way, they finished with the worst record, ended up with the number one overall pick in 2012, and got fortunate enough to sit there and get a number one overall pick when a quarterback like Andrew Luck was coming out of college. To go from one first ballot Hall of Fame franchise quarterback, Super Bowl champion, to potentially walking right into another one, most organizations only dream of having that possible scenario play out. But that's exactly what played out for the Indianapolis Colts. You fire Jim Caldwell, you bring in Chuck Pagano, you hire Ryan Grigson. Now you get Andrew Luck. In the first 3 years, things were pretty good. They were promising for the Colts. We forget about it now, but you're talking about a team in 2012 made the playoffs, 2013 made the playoffs and won a playoff game, 2014 they made the playoffs, made it to the AFC Championship game. And while the Patriots sat there and were a huge obstacle to them, and that was the thought was how are they going to get past the Patriots, you're still looking at a team with a quarterback only entering into his mid-20s that has a ton of playoff experience. They've progressed one round in the playoffs each year. You're thinking at some point in time soon, this team's got a Super Bowl in them. But then the past 2 years happened. No playoffs in 2015. Luck was hurt, missed half the season. 2016, they missed the playoffs again. And in fact, there was severe regression both offensively and defensively. A team that was making the playoffs every year and making a run of it, now in 2016, they're sitting there at 8-8. You start off 0-2, then you're 5-5, and you just can't shake the fact that you're a mediocre football team. And there's a lot of factors for that happening. You look at the fact that in the division, they lost twice to Houston. That was terrible. But losing it all to Jacksonville is just unacceptable. Those are the type of losses that keep you home for the playoffs. Now, granted, you can in part look at their schedule and you sit there and say they had to play teams like Detroit and Denver and Kansas City and Pittsburgh and Oakland, and they lost all of those games. That certainly doesn't help. But there were other teams with tough schedules that made the playoffs with lesser quarterbacks. So what the fuck happened? Well, what happened, as a lot of Colts fans will tell you, is Ryan Grigson and Chuck Pagano happened. And frankly, they're not wrong. I've already said my piece in large part about Ryan Grigson and Chuck Pagano and how I felt both of them should be fired. Now, Ryan Grigson has been fired, Chuck Pagano was not. And what I'll say next may not seem nice, but I don't know how else to fucking put it. I don't know if this whole Chuck Strong shit or him being a nice guy and a cancer survivor has helped him keep his fucking job, but I guess that is a formula for success in terms of stability and job security as an NFL head coach is get sick, get cancer, and overcome it, because a team will be slow to pull the trigger on firing your ass when you should have already been gone by now. Because the dude is a defensive-minded head coach with a defensive background, and his defenses absolutely stink. And because his defenses stink, it puts even more pressure on Andrew Luck, his young quarterback, and that offense to deliver. And it just creates problems all over the fucking place. But the real enemy in all of this was clearly Ryan Grigson. When I thought he should have immediately been fired by that druggy Jim Irsay was when he sat there and said because of Andrew Luck's contract and the contract extension they had to give him, it made it really hard for them to build a quality defense, which is just complete and total horseshit. No, the reason you can't build a well-balanced team, the reason you can't build a more competitive, viable, decent defense, Ryan Grigson, is because you were an arrogant piece of shit who didn't know what the fuck they were doing. Like, you burned a first-round pick on Bjorn Werner in 2013 when he was a terrible fit for your system. In 2014, you gave up that first-round pick to get Trent Richardson, which I mocked the Cleveland Browns for at the time, and they still deserve to be mocked, in part because they ever took Trent Richardson to begin with. But at the end of the day, clearly that deal didn't fucking work out. You gave up a first-round pick for a dude who's not even in the fucking league. He's busy beating women now. So those are 2 years of first-round picks that were shit. A first-round pick on defense for a guy that didn't fit your fucking system, who was overrated as hell coming out of Florida State. And then, frankly, a running back who was overrated as hell coming out of Alabama, and you give up a first-round pick for him. Then the next year, you draft a luxury guy in Philip Dorsett at wide receiver, ignoring the defensive side of the ball again. You spend money in free agency on guys like Trent Cole. You let guys go like Jarrell Freeman. It's just all types of shit kind of confounds itself. But when you sit there and think about it, to sit there and blame Andrew Luck's contract when he only just got this contract before the 2016 season, to me is the height and epitome of being incompetent and ridiculous and dumb. The reason the Indianapolis Colts couldn't build a better defense was because Ryan Grigson was a fucking tool who didn't know what the fuck he was doing. And it's that simple. So finally, Irsay at least got half of the offseason right. He had to do 2 moves and he only did 1. For what reason is still unbeknownst to me. He fired Ryan Grigson, which you could say is the bigger cause of the problem, but it wasn't the only problem. Because even with the less than stellar talent that Chuck Pagano had, they still should have done better, especially in that crappy-ass AFC South. Even with Andrew Luck, they have by far the best quarterback in that division. They should be able to find a way to win at least 9 or 10 games every year and own the AFC South, and they fucking haven't, especially the last 2 years. You've let the Houston Texans kick your ass. The hell is wrong with you? But they bring in somebody like a Chris Ballard to run the football side of things, to be their new general manager. Coming from the Kansas City Chiefs, it's like, solid move. The Kansas City Chiefs, from a talent and personnel standpoint, even though they're never going to win a Super Bowl with Alex Smith as a starting quarterback, they are still one of the most balanced and complete talented football teams on both sides of the ball in all the National Football League. And in particular, the Chiefs have played some good defense over the years, and they have some good talent on the defensive side of the ball that Chris Ballard has helped bring into the fold for Andy Reid in Kansas City. So it would make sense to bring in a guy like Chris Ballard to hopefully help fix the damn defense. But then you still saddle him with Chuck Pagano and all that other crap. But at the end of the day, it's a shame because you think about it, and even though the first few years were pretty good and things were looking up, at the end of the day, you look back now, and the Colts have wasted 5 years of Andrew Luck's career. You can sit there and talk about, it doesn't take much to get to that point, but maybe they're farther away than anybody realizes because of the poor drafting, because of the poor moves made in free agency, because of poor decisions to let the wrong people go. Now you're in a situation where are you going to waste another 2, 3, 4, 5 years of Andrew Luck's career, and all of a sudden you're staring down the barrel of this guy being in his early to mid-30s and he has yet to win a Super Bowl, and you're wondering if it's time to move on from him? This is not how it was supposed to work out. This is not how it was supposed to go. It was not how it was supposed to play out. But that's ultimately what it is. So Chris Ballard has his work cut out for him. But the good thing is he does have over $50 million of salary cap space to use this offseason, and thank God for Colts fans, it's not Ryan Grigson trying to spend that money. Remember when the media was spinning Ryan Grigson as this great closer in free agency? Yeah, he was able to close people because he signed the wrong people and paid old people too goddamn much money. Pretty easy to close them when you do that, especially if you already have Andrew Luck in the fold on top of that. But now Chris Ballard, can start the task of rebuilding that defense. And $50 million of salary cap space isn't a carte blanche to go on a massive spending spree, but it is a chance to potentially get a couple of guys that could really make an impact day one for your defense. Maybe a guy like a Tony Jefferson from Arizona or a Trumaine Johnson from Los Angeles, Dante Hightower. If you want to sit there and weaken the Patriots and strengthen yourself, maybe he's a guy to go after. Maybe even to a lesser degree, guys like Jabal Sheard and Nick Perry. Maybe you take a gamble on somebody like Sam Shields, if he can ever even play again. But a one-year flyer on the dude who's played at a high level in the NFL in the past, there's much worse uses of money in free agency, and you wouldn't have to use a ton of it to bring a guy like that in. So the Colts need to spend a little money to get some youth and athleticism and talent, frankly, on the defensive side of the ball because of the poor drafting and free agent decisions made by nincompoop Grigson over the years. But it's still going to come down a lot to the NFL draft because they have to get young talent and they have to build them up and all of that. Which is interesting because will Chuck Pagano be there after 2017? And if he's gone, will they continue to run a 3-4? Will they switch defensive systems and defensive philosophies with a new head coach? A lot of that remains uncertain, but the reality is right now, Chuck Pagano is the football coach. This is a 3-4 team, and you have to build your team with that in mind. Number one need for the program here for the Colts is they have to get talent on the edge. They need impact edge rushers in the worst way. They've either been too old or too bad on the edges for far too long. You could say that about the inside linebacker position too, but in particular on the edges. The Colts most likely will be in a position to get a potential impact edge rusher at number 14 or 15, wherever they end up picking in the first round, whether that's a guy like Tack McKinley, the Tack Attack from UCLA, or that's Derek Barnett from Tennessee. They'll have a chance to get an impact edge rusher for their system in round number 1. Now, this is a draft that seems to be pretty deep and talented in terms of edge rushers, so maybe they don't have to take one round 1, but it is a huge need, and it is a need they will have to address multiple times in this draft. I think their secondary needs massive overhauling, both the corner and safety position. If you're a Colts fan, you're going to say, well, we've got this guy, you ain't got shit. Your defense is doo-doo. And until your defense shows any semblance of being a decent to top flight unit in the NFL, just about every fucking buddy on that unit is replaceable. Get it, got it, good. But as much as anything else, you could argue a top need for this team is the running back position. Because, Frank Gore is a borderline Hall of Fame type of guy, but he was a guy that was somewhat limited here at the tail end of his career. Now, maybe he's back for 2017, but how much more mileage do you really think is going to be on Frank Gore's body? One thing that could really help both the offense with Andrew Luck and that defense is to get a more consistent, reliable running game to take some of the pressure off of Andrew Luck in the passing game. Furthermore, allow the Colts to play a little bit more ball control offense, God fucking forbid, so that way your crappy defense doesn't have to be on the field as often, and maybe you don't have to have Captain Comeback Luck try to bring you back from 21 points down every other fucking game because your offense starts off slowly because there's no balance or consistency or rhythm to what they're doing in terms of their game plan, and their defense goes out in the first 3 drives and gives up 3 easy touchdowns. So a guy like Dalvin Cook makes a world of sense here. And even if there are edge rushers, even if you aren't that concerned about Tim Williams' off the field issues and you see that explosive edge talent and you think he's a guy worth that pick, if a Dalvin Cook is on the board, he might have to be that dude. Because at some of the positions, fortunately for the Colts where they have needs, the draft is pretty good in that area, including running back. But in terms of best players that could be available potentially where the Colts are picking, Dalvin Cook might be that dude. And I know we could talk about they need defensive talent and everything else, but if you feel like Dalvin Cook, a guy like that, or if Cook's not there but a Fournette is, you think a Fournette is that type of back, it's that type of impact player, you can take that, we can get a running back later shit and shove it up your fucking ass. If the guy is an impact player and he's worth that first round pick, then you take that guy with that first round pick. And it'll be amazing how many things really fall into place. This will be an incredibly interesting offseason, free agency, draft period to watch for the Indianapolis Colts. Because are they going to right their ship quickly and be in a position where they should be, which is running the AFC South and being one of the teams banging it out for AFC supremacy? Or are they going to continue to squander more precious peak years of Andrew Luck's career?